France 24 debate. We're looking at we're looking at Egypt and how the outgoing military has made its move. The Muslim Brotherhood calling it a soft coup. Ahead of the announcement of results of the presidential election runoff that pits the Brotherhood's candidate against Hosni Mubarak's last prime minister. With us to talk about it from Cairo, Ihab Mohammed Youssef, who heads the Risk-Free Egypt consultancy. Welcome back, sir. Welcome back as well to Stephen Cook of the Council on Foreign Relations. He's in Washington, D.C. And here in the studio, Shahinaz Abdel Salam, author in French of Egypt, the Beginning of Freedom. And also with us, Hana Youssef, activist with the January 25th movement. Welcome back to all of you. We were talking just before the break about the timing of the announcements made by the military just as this presidential election runoff, the first in Egypt's history, it's the first time they've gone to a runoff, was happening. The U.S. Defense Secretary, not amused that when he spoke to Field Marshal Tantawi last Friday, Parliament had already been dissolved, but the leader of the SCAF had made no mention to him of plans to extend the powers of the armed forces and curtail those of the future president. An announcement that came, quote, as polls were closing for the presidential election. Here's what the Pentagon has said through a spokesperson on Monday. We support the Egyptian people in their expectation that the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces will transfer full power to a democratically elected civilian government as the SCAF previously announced. Stephen Cook, there are questions that arise from all of this. Seeing the closeness of relations between the U.S. and Egyptian military, did the Egyptians military, did the SCAF do this without at all the consent of anyone in Washington?
The SCAF has been operating without the consent of anyone, no less anyone in Washington, since the uprising in Egypt. I think it is somewhat inaccurate to suggest that the United States has tremendous amount of leverage over Field Marshal Tantawi and his officers. They clearly believe that their domestic political interests are at stake. And no matter what the United States says at this point, they are going to pursue those interests as they see fit. I think it was appropriate for the United States to call them out, to demand that the SCAF uphold its commitments. But I don't think that that is going to ultimately change the behavior of a group of military officers who believe that their position within the political system, as well as their vast economic interests, are at stake through a transition from the old regime, a military-dominated regime, to a more democratic one. The $1.3 billion that the United States gives to Egypt on an annual basis is not as much money as it once was. It's the same amount of money that the United States has been giving Egypt, the Egyptian military, since 1983. It has, as a result, eroded in overall value. So I think that what we are seeing is a group of officers who are not susceptible to the leverage of the Egyptians themselves or its most important patron, the United States.
And Stephen, some say that $1.3 billion, it was approved in March, that it was some claiming that it was rushed through so that the U.S. wouldn't be in a position to have to do any arbitrage of this kind when election time came around. Is that true?
Well, there was actually a more robust debate than the conventional wisdom suggests about the aid and delivering the aid to the Egyptians. It was not rushed. In fact, there was some talk of actually delaying it to demonstrate Washington's unhappiness over the NGO affair, in which NGO activists working for American NGOs were detained and tried in Egypt. I think the determination was made that the Egyptian armed forces it plays an important role for the United States, not in terms of what they themselves actually do, but what they provide for the United States, which is overflight rights over Egypt for aircraft going to the Persian Gulf, for expedited transit through the Suez Canal, for other logistical type of assistance when it comes to U.S. military operations in the Persian Gulf. The question is whether that is worth it, given what's happened in Egypt, or is there some other way for the United States to support its military structures in the Persian Gulf without having to underwrite the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces and what goes on and what they have done in Egypt.
Ihab Mohammed Youssef, what's your reaction to the strong statement from the U.S. Defense Department?
No, I think that the statement came with not very understanding of the situation in Egypt, and I think that my friend Stephen is having the same view. The point is, we can say that because the military has stated a declaration for the amendment of the constitution, and when we look about the situation now in Egypt, we have a parliament that have been dissolved maybe 10 days ago, and we need a legislation power. This legislation power cannot be given to the president because the president has another role to play, which is very important role, is to manage the whole country, choose the ministers, do the work to do, and legislations should be with the parliament. And within the amendment of the constitution that have been announced from the SCAF 2 days ago, says that the parliament, the constitutional committee and the constitution should be done in 3 months, and the elections for the parliament should be there. So in 4 months coming, we should have a parliament, and then the legislation power will be given there. The point is, I know the fears that the people are having, and I totally understand, but the point is we are in the middle of a transition period, which is very critical for the Egyptians, and at the same time, all the Egyptians didn't have the much experience to manage the situation through the 18 months in the best way. But I think that the SCAF, even with their mistakes, what they have promised to do, they delivered, because they went into the process and the roadmap as the people agreed on in 19 March 2011, where they asked for a parliament elections, then the constitution, and then the presidential election. And here we are in the second phase. Maybe tomorrow where the announcement will be there. So the president, whatever who's going to be, either Shafi or Morsi,
yeah, but now it's no longer a
his
constituent assembly. It's no longer an elected constituent assembly that's going to write that new constitution.
I totally agree with you, but this have been done through Egypt several times before, because we tried, the Egyptians tried to elect a constitutional assembly 2 times till now, and they failed. Everybody is trying to take his power as much as he can be, and here I should agree with Shahnaz when she was saying that the Muslim Brotherhoods are trying to use the whole society and even the people of 6th of April and the youth to collect all power that they can, and then they will deal with it to the extent to be able and be controlling everything. The point is, in the amendment of the constitution, it was also announced, because some people are saying that the coming president will not have the power and he will not be able to announce the declaration of war if he has to, and this should come through the approval from the military as well. But I think that this is fair, because we don't want to have a sole power in one people's hand. So they announced that there will be a national security committee headed by the president himself, having the Minister of Defense and the head of the intelligence and the Prime Minister. So decisions should be taken collectively.
Should be taken collectively. But let me bring in Hannah Youssef here. Again, without an elected constituent assembly writing those rules.
Well, first of all, just a small comment. I don't think we should call a well-worked-out plan to take over the legislative, executive, economic, prosecution powers in a country as mistakes of SCAF. They have now all the powers in the country, and I don't think that's just by mistakes that we have arrived at this point. I think that's misleading the public. The Constitutional Assembly, why does SCAF want to have the final word? Because SCAF wants to be a state within a state. It wants to have the final word. So they have some of the reasons why we have not been able to make a Constituent Assembly is because SCAF will not allow a Constituent Assembly or a parliament to not give it the final word.
Ihab Mohammed Youssef?
I totally agree with Hannah's fear, and I totally agree that a lot of people should think this way. But what is the other option? As Shahnaz was saying, we don't have so much trust in the Muslim Brotherhoods, and we don't have leaders that took ownership and stand there to take their rights and to defend the Egyptian society. And when it came to war, when people were killing each other in the streets, which happened several times since the revolution till now, nobody stand there and try to protect them. So now we need need some people to be able to control the country and to take the lead, to lead us into a better future, while we still are in the process of electing our parliament once more, because we were not lucky in our last parliament, and I think that the most of the Egyptians were not satisfied with the performance of the parliament members during the last time. These guys were not able to do a constitution, and they were not able to handle the people's need. Now I know it's not fair to put it in the SCAF's hand, and it's not good. But at the same time, we have a president who's going to be elected freely from the society. He has all the power to assign all the ministers, including the Minister of Defense. He doesn't have some powers like the legislation, which shouldn't be with the president anymore. And the only thing that is missing in his hand is the declaration of war. And I think that Egypt is not in a state that can issue a declaration of war now. So
let me ask Stephen Cook on this. Stephen, is this the way you understand the newly defined powers of the new of the upcoming president?
This is, I think it's clear to anybody looking at this objectively, is that the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces does not trust, should Mohamed Morsi in particular become president, that their interests will be taken care of. And the kind of gutting of the president's power and a national defense council, and the limitations on the president's ability to make national security, foreign policy, and defense decisions are reminiscent of what the Turkish armed forces did in the early 1980s, and reserving for themselves specific powers that left them autonomous from civilian elected leaders. That certainly compromised the quality of Turkish democracy. And it's not a very good beginning for Egypt's supposed transition to a more democratic country. Now, of course, these transitions never happen from point A to point B very smoothly, but it seems that the armed forces is not interested in an actual genuine transition.
All right, and on the France 24 debate Facebook page, we asked you, should the U.S. cut off the tap of military aid? Here's some of your remarks. No, says Ben. However, there should be a process of constructive engagement that leads to the strengthening of national institutions and the promotion of true representational democracy with checks, balances, and transparency. While Badir says everybody, including Washington, must keep their noses out of Egypt. Let the 90 million Egyptians write their own future, whether by accepting liberals or Islamists or the military or even pharaohs. Shahinaz Abdel Salam, do you agree with that?
I do agree, of course, it's the Egyptian people who should write their constitution, but it's very complicated now. And I think even the United States or Washington, they have communication with both the Muslim Brotherhood and SCAF. Of course, we know that. Even
is Washington handling it the best they can?
I think they are confused like everyone. It's a big fight between two big power in Egypt since years, and we don't know how it will finish. But I think that the SCAF can leave Morsi to be president, and I think this will solve a lot of problems. I mean, people in Tahrir will leave Tahrir, but then they can negotiate their safe exit, and then I think the revolution will lose everything. So this is why I think the revolution, I think, should continue on what we said from the beginning. No, we chant this. We were singing things in the 11th February when Mubarak left. We want a civil Egypt, not military, not religious. That's what we want, and that's what we insist to do.
But the voters picked otherwise. They gave more than half in those legislative elections. Now, more than half voted for, in fact, 3/4, if you include the Salafists, voted for religious parties of some form or another.
Well, no, for the presidential election, it was not true. Morsi take like 4 or 5 millions, and now this time in the first time, and now he took like 13. 8 of them, 8 million is the people from the revolution. So Muslim Brotherhood, they have only 20% of votes. This is the reality. We shouldn't say that they have more.
The other issue in the midst of all of this, and there was on Twitter, Hisham Melhem of Al Arabia's news channel, their Washington bureau, who said it was a big mistake to resume unconditional military aid to Egypt. The SCAF thinks the U.S. can be blackmailed because of the peace treaty with Israel. Hannah Youssef, we saw that there was an attack on Monday by unidentified gunmen who crossed the Sinai border and killed an Israeli worker. The Israelis, fearing that Egyptian security forces are losing their grip over that region. Are we going to see things like incidents like this, you think?
Incidents like this have been happening for a while. This is nothing new. And also from the other side, Israeli forces have gone into Egyptian territory and killed Egyptians and Egyptian soldiers without very much reaction from SCAF, but that's another story. But I think this is all, I think we have to look at where is the money. We're talking about 1.3 billion US dollars in military aid, but the US interest in Egypt with SCAF is at least a factor, just purely militarily, at least a factor 20 over that. So you can call
what kind of interest?
Egypt makes the Egyptian military produce armaments and produce weapons for a substantial part of the arms for the US military. There are many joint ventures in industry going from consumer goods to livestock to construction, maritime services to weapons and so on and so forth. So if we're going to talk about why SCAF is doing this, it's all about the money. It's all about the industry and protecting what some people say up to 40% of the economy which they control. And I do not believe that Field Marshal Tantawi will do anything that can risk the U.S. financial interest in Egypt without actually asking the U.S.
Oh, Hannah, you've put that out there, and it's a great debate topic. But we're going to have to leave it there. Unfortunately, we're going to see if whether or not the SCAF tempts fate. I want to thank you though for joining us today. I want to thank Shainaz Abdel Salam, Ihab Mohammed Youssef for being with us from Cairo, and Stephen Cook at the Council of Foreign Relations in Washington. Thank you for being with us here as well in the France 24 debate. Stay with us. Coming up next, Matthew Warren has all the day's business news here on France 24.